Welcome back to the Clinical CEO. I'm Jessica Echeverri, multiple seven-figure clinic business owner, and this is episode number 3. Welcome to the Clinical CEO podcast. Build the business your future self will thank you for. I have spent more than 20 years, I'm aging myself, in this profession. I have supervised students. I have sat on boards. I have trained therapists in equine-assisted work. I've trained therapists in all other modalities. I've run clinical operations across multiple countries. I've hired clinicians. I've fired clinicians. I have referred clients to other clinicians, and I've had those clients or other clients referred back to me from clinicians who could not hold what that client brought into the room. And in 18 years of actually doing this work, I have not met one therapist, not one, who did not walk into this profession carrying something. And that includes me. I want to say that part out loud before I say something else, because I'm going to name a pattern in the field and I have to name it for myself first. I did not become a therapist because I had a perfectly calibrated childhood and an even less calibrated adulthood. And I was looking for an interesting career. I thought I was a helper because I was kind, but really it was because I was looking for help. I became a therapist because of the things that had happened to me, things that happened around me, and the things I was trying to understand about people I loved. And most of you who are listening are the exact same. You know you're the same. You did not pick this field out of a career aptitude test. You picked it because something in your life made you want to sit with other people's suffering for a living. That is not weakness. That, in a lot of ways, is actually the qualifying credential. The best therapists that I know are the ones who got into the work because they needed to understand something about being a human. And they figured that they might as well get paid for it along the way to keep studying. But here's the problem. Being drawn into this work because of your own material is not the same as doing the work on your own material. And those are two different things. Like, this is stuff that they teach us in graduate school, right? Like, you have to do your own work. Here's the problem. Being drawn into this work because of your own material is not the same as doing the work on your own material. They're two different things. The field's clear about this. They always say that you have to do your own work. But the pretense that they're the same thing is breaking your practice. Let me say what I actually mean. I'm not interested in telling you that you need to go to therapy because you have issues. You're a human being. Of course you have issues. Everybody on this planet, including the therapist you refer your hardest clients to, including me, including the clinician you trained, including your supervisor or your teachers who certified you, all of them have issues. It's the same thing we say to our clients. The only way that it's a problem is if it starts to affect your life. Well, the problem here is that the clinician is carrying unfinished work, and the unfinished work leads into how she runs her business. And she doesn't see it because she has stopped tracking her own material with the same rigor that she tracks her client's material. That's the episode. That's the whole episode in one sentence. I want to tell you why I am making this the 3rd episode, because I think it's really important. It's a deliberate choice, and I want you to understand it. The first 2 episodes of this season were about structure. They're about you need to build your business, get rid of the job that you turned it into, the decision to turn it back into a business. Those are strategic questions that you have to ask yourself. They're all structural answers. And we're going to spend most of the season on them, to be honest. But I can't teach you the structural answers and have them actually work in your practice if your own material is running the operation from underneath. I've just watched it fail too many times. I've watched brilliant clinicians take foundations, take my full year clinical business mastery course, learn every framework, build every system, and then sit down on a random Tuesday to send a rate change email and not be able to hit send. Not because they didn't not want to charge the rate. They'd done the math. The rate was right. They could not hit send because sending that email would have required them to be the woman who they hadn't yet done the work to become. And the structural training we had done together could not take them the rest of the way. So this is my bridge episode. Before I teach you anything else about visibility, pricing, systems, leverage, scaling, I need you to understand that the clinician who implements those things has to have done a specific kind of personal work for it all to stick. That's why this conversation is episode 3 in the season. Not because I love hard conversations. Oh, okay, yeah, I do. It's because the rest of the season or the rest of the material I'm going to teach you, it's not going to work if you don't handle this part first. So let me give you some examples because abstracts are useless here. So you have a clinician who grew up in a home where money was scarce and love was conditional on earning. She becomes a therapist. She's really good at her job, and she cannot, for the life of her, raise her rates. She's been charging the same rate for 4 years. Inflation has been eating her alive. She has rationalized it 700 different ways about why she's not raising her rates. Her clients can't afford more. She doesn't need to be greedy. She'll raise them next year for sure once things calm down. Next year never comes because next year she'll be the same woman carrying the same belief that asking to be paid properly will cost her love. That's not a business problem. That's a clinical problem showing up for her in pricing. So here's another one. You have a clinician who grew up as an emotional caretaker to her family, parentified, the one who held everybody's feelings before she could ever have her own. She becomes a therapist, and she is exquisite at holding space for her clients. And she cannot, under any circumstance, take a week off because the idea of clients being disappointed in her sets off something that feels in her body like actual danger. She hasn't actually connected the fact that she refuses to take the vacation with that little girl who learned that disappointing people meant losing them. She just knows she can't take a week off. She calls it dedication. She calls it ethical practice. She calls it putting her clients first. But it's not dedication. It's a trauma response, running her business, where a trauma response has no business being. You want another one? Maybe some of you will find yourself in this one. You have a clinician who grew up having to be the competent one, the one who never needed help, the one who figured it out. She becomes a therapist and she's brilliant. She can't hire anyone. She can't delegate anything. She can't bring in a business coach. She can't pay for an admin because the idea of needing help feels to her like a confession that she's not actually as capable as what she's been pretending to be her entire life. She's going to work herself into the ground before she ever asks for help because asking for help was not safe in the house she grew up in. She calls it perfectionism. She calls it having high standards. She calls it a personality trait. It's not a personality trait. It's an old survival strategy running her business. Again, no business running her business. Okay, one more and then I'll stop. I just want those who are listening, who are in these spaces, to be able to understand that I see you. You have a clinician who grew up in a family where anger was dangerous. Somebody in the house had a temper, or somebody in the house was afraid of somebody else's temper. And the little girl in that house learned that keeping the peace was the job, and the job was hers. And she becomes a therapist. And she's extraordinary with the conflict in the room because she has been reading rooms her whole life. And she cannot, under any circumstance, have a difficult conversation with anyone who works for her. She can't tell the administrative assistant that the work's not meeting her standard. She can't tell the associate clinician that the notes are not being turned in on time. She can't tell a contractor that the invoice is wrong. She avoids, she works around, and she absorbs the cost, or she just does the work herself rather than ask the person to redo it. And the practice runs on her absorbing every piece of friction the entire operation produces. And she calls it being an easygoing boss. She calls it not wanting to micromanage. She calls it trusting her team. And it's not all of those things. Those are all great things when they're really those things. But this was not those things. It's a 30-something-year-old strategy for not getting yelled at running her business. And again, it's got no business running her business. Honestly, I could keep going. I have over a decade of supervision patterns to draw from. I think the point that I want you to see is that the specific shape of the material is different in every clinician, but the structure is always the same. Something happened earlier in your life that taught your nervous system a rule about how to stay safe. The rule has been excellent keeping you safe all these years, but the rule is running your business now. And because that rule is operating in your subconscious awareness, you can't see the rule that you've made around your business. You just see it as who you are, what you do. You see it as your personality, your values, your clinical ethics, your professionalism, and even your leadership style. And really, it's none of those things. It's a rule. And that rule is the reason why your business is not moving. I see this so much, and I've seen it for so many years. And it doesn't get better by itself. It doesn't get better because you read a book about money mindset. It doesn't get better because you listen to a podcast, including this one. It gets better when you do your own work. I want to name something because our profession is a strange one. And I think it's a part of why we don't talk about these things openly. And I think it's important to name it because I think that silence is only a part of the problem. So our field has a strange relationship with its own practitioner's material. On one hand, we accept that as a foundational premises that a clinician cannot be good at doing the work without some level of self-awareness about her own material, right? Like we're taught this from the very beginning. Almost every form of training tells you to go to personal therapy at some stage. Almost every supervisor asks about countertransference. We all know this at a clinical level. But on the other hand, the culture of the profession is intensely private about what practitioners are actually doing with their own material on an ongoing basis. We don't ask each other about whether we're in therapy right now. We don't talk about our own supervision a lot of the time, rather alone our own personal therapeutic work or what we've been sitting with this year. And even less if you're in private practice and you don't have many people around you. We treat all of this like it's private, almost shameful that we too are human and we have material that we need to work through too. We publish research papers, we build programs, we supervise students as if we have all done our own work. And now we're standing above it and it's done. That's a thing of the past. But we haven't. None of us has. I've been in therapy for, my good Lord, like 20 years and I still need help. The silence that our industry produces around this produces a clinician who thinks she's the only one whose baggage is interfering in her business. If she even figures out that it's interfering in her business. And so she hides it. She doesn't address it because that would be shameful. That would, I don't know, show her real self to everybody. And so it keeps running her operation. And I'm talking about this openly on this show because I think the silence costs more than the honesty does. I would rather inspire a few clinicians into doing their work than let the culture of this privacy keep producing therapists who are stuck at 100,000 a year for reasons that they can't even name. Now, here's where I get a little snotty about this. And I want to warn you before I say it. Trigger warning. I hate trigger warnings, but hey. You cannot supervise your way out of your baggage. You can't journal your way out. You can't Instagram therapist your way out by posting about attachment theory. You can't out-credential it. Trust me, I tried. You can't out-read it. Can't out-teach it. I've watched clinicians get entire PhDs trying to out-intellectualize material that would have taken them 2 years in a chair with a good therapist that could actually resolve it. The work is the work. It is sitting in the room with somebody who is not you and letting her see the parts of you that you have been hiding from yourself. That's the hard part. It's expensive and it's uncomfortable and it's humbling. And let's be honest, it's the job of the profession. If you're a practicing clinician and you have not done your own therapy in the past 2 years, I'm going to say this plainly. Go and do your damn work. You need to go to therapy. I'm not saying it to be rude. I'm saying it because it's the one sentence that I wish somebody had said to me when I was 30 years old, running a business that was actually a job and wondering why I could not bring myself to raise my rates. Or why I couldn't quit my job in the car industry and actually put food on the table. I wasn't stuck because I didn't understand pricing. I was stuck because I had unfinished work. And the unfinished work was making the pricing changes an incredibly difficult decision for me every time I sat down to do it. And I can tell you very honestly that when I actually went and started doing my own therapy consistently, my business started moving. Not because therapy taught me business, but because therapy cleared the thing that was blocking me from running a business and believing that I was worthy enough to actually make it to 7 figures. And I'm not telling you any of this to talk about my own material on a public podcast. I'm telling you because I think it's going to help if you hear that a clinician with my credentials running multiple successful businesses who also struggled in business in her first years had specific ongoing material that had to be dealt with for me to be able to be successful. And I want to model to my audience what I'm asking them to do. Specifically, I had to work on money, on the part of me that grew up watching the women around me work themselves into exhaustion and still not really be safe. And the part of me that equated asking to be paid well with a kind of vulnerability I could not afford. I worked on that for years. I still work on it. I needed to forgive my younger self for all of the things that I did to be able to open up the energy of receiving. And I've worked on a lot of that, but I'll tell you, sometimes those old rules of mine still show up and I can feel it. And I'm like, wait, what's going on here? I have to stop and do my work. Because we know this, guys. We know this. We see it in our clients all the time. We can name it in our clients, but we don't name it in ourselves. Just because you go and work through some stuff doesn't mean that it's not going to trigger you again 5 years down the road, 10 years down the road. I also had to work on control, specifically on the part of me that believed I had to be the one who held everything together. Because if I let anyone else hold any piece of my business, they'd ruin it. Running 5 businesses has forced me in ways nothing else could to keep working on that. I've learned and relearned many times that operations run better when I'm not the one holding every piece. And I still catch myself reaching for that piece I should be letting someone else hold. An email super simple that I see come in at 11 o'clock at night. And I'm like, oh, I'll just answer it for her. I've worked on visibility, specifically the part of me that was raised to be humble and not draw attention on myself, to let good work speak for itself. That rule almost killed my first business. And I've had to unlearn it, relearn it, and unlearn it again. And I'm doing it right now by recording this podcast because that old rule would have not let me do this years ago. Every episode of this podcast in a small way is me choosing to heal that wound over and over again. And I'm telling you all this because I want you to understand that my work is ongoing too. It's not a past event. It's not a completed chapter in my life. It's a relationship that I have with myself, held in a clinical space with a professional who's not me, that I have maintained in some form of my adult life and that has helped me incredibly in business. So please remember that. You're not just going to do the work once and be done. You're going to be doing it in different chapters. Each chapter is for the women you are at that stage in your career. The work you did at 30 is not the same work you need to do at 40. The work at 40 is not the same as 50. Business growth will keep resurfacing new material because at every level of scaling, it requires a different version of you. And the previous version has to make room for the next one. And sadly, and this is where it's important for the subjects that I talk about on my podcast, is that the clinicians who are doing this work continuously are usually the ones who their businesses keep moving. And the clinicians who don't are usually the ones that plateau at 100K a year and they stay there. And they've reached the ceiling and they're sometimes okay with that, but they're not really okay. They just convince themselves that they're okay with it because they don't know what else to do. And for those of you who are pushing back in your head right now, some of you are thinking, I've done my work. I did 5 years of therapy in my 20s. I did IFS. I did EMDR. I'm not the clinician you're describing. Good. Then this episode is not about you. But I want you to sit in the possibility that just for a second, that material you resolved 10 years ago is not necessarily the same material that you're carrying right now. People grow. Material shifts. New life stages bring new shit to look after. The work you did in your 20s was for the woman you were in your 20s. The woman running your practice right now, the woman making pricing decisions and hiring decisions and whether to take a vacation decisions right now is a completely different woman. She has her own stuff to deal with. And you owe her the same rigor that you gave that 20-year-old girl 10, 15 years ago. So some of you are probably thinking, I can't afford therapy right now. I hear you. I've been there. And the honest answer is that if you can't afford therapy, you need to raise your rates, which we'll talk about in a couple episodes. And raising your rates is going to require you to resolve the material that is blocking you from raising your rates. And the material is what we just talked about. It's a cycle. I know the cycle. We all know the cycle. And the cycle is the problem. The way out of the cycle is to go and find a therapist who sees clinicians, tell her the truth, pay what you can right now, and start. I'm going to actually personally research some low-cost online options that anybody can access, and I'll leave them in the show notes. The business will catch up with your work. Your business is going to get better when you do the work. You don't fix the business first and then do the work. You do the work and the business fixes itself as you clear out all that old garbage that has been running your business all these years. Okay, side quest over. I think we need to get back to business, really. I mean, when we're looking at foundational pieces, every structural problem that we're going to be talking about in the rest of the season has a clinical parallel underneath of it. When I teach you to raise your rates, I'm going to be asking you to do something that maybe your material will resist. When I teach you to delegate, I'm going to be asking you to do something that maybe that material resists. When I teach you to build revenue streams that do not depend on your body in your chair, I'm going to be asking you to do something that if you haven't fixed that material, it's going to resist. You will have the tactical information, you'll have the framework, you will understand intellectually what to do, but your material is going to be making that decision for you every time. And if you have not done the work that lets you catch that material when it shows up, then it's just going to continue affecting your business and your finances and your stress levels in your life. And that is why the clinicians who do the best work in my programs are not the clinicians with like the sharpest business instincts. They're usually the clinicians who are actively in their own therapy while they're in the program, because I tell them that they should be. And I think that's some of the things that some of these business coaches might not see. And that helps my clients to catch their own rules or material in real time so that when it's showing up and making a decision for them, that they can override it, not because they've eliminated it, but because they can see it clearly enough to make a different choice. And that, my friends, is what doing your own work, your own therapeutic clinical work while you're in business gives you the ability to recognize it in real time and not let it run your business. I want to close with something that I said at the very beginning of this episode and that I didn't come back to because this really matters. I said that everybody in the industry has baggage, including me, and I meant it. I'm not standing up here on my soapbox as a clinician who has it all figured out and now gets to lecture the rest of you. I have spent more than 20 years in this field with 18 plus years of those doing therapy, and I am still in my own therapy. I still do my own work. I still catch myself every once in a while making a decision in my business that isn't coming from the clinical CEO in me. It's coming from the girl who was 5, 12, 15, 32. It's coming from that woman who was closing down her business that cold February in Canada, sitting in a parking lot exhausted and convinced that she just couldn't do it anymore. And that woman, I'm telling you, still shows up for me sometimes. The difference is that between now and then is that I can see her when she shows up. I can make a different decision anyways. And that is what doing your own work gives you, not the absence of material. The ability to recognize it in real time and not let it run your business. That is the job. That is a real clinical CEO. So if you're still here and this episode landed on you in a way that you can see some things going on for yourself, I would love it if you would go to www.jessicaecheverri.com and download the Foundations Curriculum Overview. It's free. It's going to show you what the structural layer of the clinical CEO role really looks like. And that's important because it's the structural layer that makes the clinical work that you do on yourself or with yourself or in conjunction with your therapist actually stick in your business decisions. And next week, we're going to start talking about what we're actually going to do with it. So next week, we're going to talk about visibility and why you not being visible is not humility. It's actually a professional problem. So I'll see you then. This is the Clinical CEO, and I'm Jessica Echeverri. Build the practice your future self will thank you for.